Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're making pumpkin spice macarons, and this recipe almost defeated me. To start this dish, we need 3 room temperature egg whites. I actually aged my egg whites, which means I left them covered on the counter overnight. If that freaks you out, just use room temperature. But we need to weigh out 100 grams of egg white. We also need to weigh out 140 grams of fine almond flour. And yes, we are measuring everything in this recipe because macarons are very fiddly. And we have to weigh out 130 grams of powdered sugar. Now we want these ingredients ultra fine, so we're going to add the almond flour and the confectioner sugar to the bowl of a food processor. And we need to add a couple spices here to make them more pumpkin spicy. So I have a 1/4 teaspoon of ground ginger, a 1/4 teaspoon of ground clove, and 1/8 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Now, this is my 4th attempt at this recipe in the same amount of days, and when I originally did the first 3, I actually used a blend of cinnamon, allspice, and turmeric, and I did like that flavor better. It tasted more like a gingerbread, while this tastes a lot more subtle, but that blend of spices also turned the macaron shells a little brown, and I wanted these to be a nice pale orange, so I switched up the spice ingredients, although I'm going to include those other ones in the ingredient description below. And we're going to process this for 1 minute, but 30 seconds in, go in, don't forget to unlock your food processor, take off the whole top unit, and give this a shake because those bottom particles are much finer than the top, and we want everything to get a nice, good process. After a minute, we're going to dump this into a strainer. We're going to sift it into a large bowl. When we get to the bottom of this sift, you're going to notice a couple of large particles. Just discard those because we want a nice, smooth, even very fine powder for our macaron shells. We're not just going to sift this once, we're going to sift this twice because we want to make this as smooth and evenly textured as possible. So if you get any of the larger particles at the end of the second sift, just discard those as well. Now that our dry ingredients are taken care of, we're going to move over to our stand mixer. Now you can use a hand mixer for this as well. We're just going to tip in all of our egg whites. And once it starts forming a couple of little bubbles, we're going to add in a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar. This is going to help stabilize those egg whites and help us form nice, stiff peaks. Now once we get the eggs frothy, we're going to add 100 grams of sugar, but we're not going to add it in all at once because that's just going to deflate any of the air that we've already processed into this. This needs to go in 1 tablespoon at a time. I know this seems tedious, but we want to add that 1 tablespoon in, let that sugar completely melt into the egg whites before we add in the 2nd tablespoon. And this is going to ensure that our egg whites don't deflate and that we get a nice, airy, fluffy mix. Now we're at the soft peak stage of these egg whites, this meringue, so it's at this point where you want to add food coloring. I'm adding in a little red and a little yellow to create a nice pale orange, and I'm using gel food coloring. You don't want to use liquid because it's going to introduce too much moisture into our meringue. You could also use a powdered food coloring. That will work just as well. We're going to check on our meringue, and it's at a medium peak, so this needs to go a little longer, because we want a nice stiff peak. And we're going to know we've reached the stiff peak stage when you can take your whisk out and your little peaks stand up straight and they don't flop over. Another fun way to test this is to flip your bowl over your head usually, and if nothing falls out, then we're good to go. Now to introduce our dry ingredients to our wet ingredients, we have to do this in increments. So take 1/3 cup of your dry, tip it into your meringue, and then we're going to start folding this in. And this is basically just going in with a J stroke, so you're scraping the bottom of the sides and then cutting down through the middle, because we don't want to deflate our meringue. We've worked so hard to incorporate so much air. We want to keep that air in there as much as possible. Now the second batch, you can add a little bit more than 1/3 cup. Continue to fold that in. And once that bit is incorporated, then you can go in and add the rest of your dry ingredients and then continue to fold until you get a lovely, cohesive mixture. This is going to take a little patience. Just take your time. There's no rush in this. Once everything is mostly incorporated in, go into your batter and start pushing it up against the sides of your bowl. We want to encourage as many of those larger air bubbles to be released as possible. And the consistency of your batter should run off your spatula like lava, but who has ever seen lava? The easiest way to test this is pull up your spatula. If you get a nice long ribbon and you can form a figure 8 without the batter breaking, you know your batter is ready now. Now I have a little pastry bag here. I fitted it with a 1/2 inch round pastry tip, and we're going to pour our batter into this bag. I like to use a tall container. This just makes it so much easier to get all of your batter into your pastry bag without creating a huge mess. Now to bake these, there are these silicone mats that are meant for macarons. They are absolute garbage. Throw that away. They don't allow the macaron to dry out. They stick. Maybe they work for some people. They definitely did not work for me the 3 times that I attempted to use it. So parchment paper is the way to go. So cut out a piece of parchment that's large enough to fit your pan, and then take out any of that leftover macaron batter. You're going to dot it onto your baking tray, and then press the edges of your parchment down. This is going to help that parchment stick to your tray so it doesn't move when we go to pipe on our macaron, and it won't move in the oven as well. Trust me, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Now to pipe the macarons, you want to pipe vertically straight down. You don't want to add an angle. And I like macarons the size of like a $1/2. So just squeeze your bag until you get the $1/2, lift the bag, and then give it a little twirl. This is going to help make a flatter surface instead of like a gnome hat. So just continue to pipe. And remember that we're going to need an even number of shells since we're going to be sandwiching these together. I actually baked these in 2 batches because I had more batter than I had room on my tray, but we're going to let these sit on the counter for 30 minutes. It's going to create this nice, lovely little skin on the outside of our macaron, and you'll know it's ready when you can brush your hand over it. But first we have to tap out any of those air bubbles, so give that a couple smacks. But this is what I mean. You should be able to brush your finger over the top and no meringue comes off on your finger. So we're going to bake these at 300 degrees for 7 minutes, go and flip the tray around and bake for another 7 minutes, and you're going to start noticing these lovely little feet forming on the bottom, and that's what you want. So we're going to let those cool for 30 minutes while we create a little decoration. So I'm putting at 1/2 a cap full of vodka. If I wasn't participating in Sober October, I probably would have taken a shot because of how many attempts it took for me to get these right. We're going to add in a little luster dust. And the reason I'm using vodka is it evaporates very quickly. It's not going to compromise our macaron shells. If you use water, it would seep in and make your macaron shells soggy. So just adding that luster dust until you form a paste. Now you know your macarons are done when you can lift them straight off the parchment and nothing sticks. So I'm just using a little paintbrush here to paint on a little beautiful design. You could skip this step if you wanted to. I just wanted to be a little extra fancy. We're going to let those dry for 30 minutes while we move on to our filling. So I have 4 ounces of room temperature cream cheese and 4 ounces of unsweetened pumpkin puree. Because the macaron shell is sweet enough, we need to add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt, as well as 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. I'm using vanilla paste here because I just find it has more potent flavor. I'm going to give this a nice mix until it's well incorporated. And this looks good, but I think I want it a little bit more orange. And it's lacking a little spice, so I think I'm going to add a little cinnamon. So we're going to add a tablespoon more of pumpkin puree and 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, just to give it a little zhuzh. Mix that all together until that's all incorporated, and we are going to put this in a pastry bag. If you don't have pastry bags, they have nice disposable ones that you can buy. You can get them on Amazon or even at the grocery store. Now we need to find 2 shells approximately the same size. And there's a debate about how much filling you should put into your macarons. Some people like a lot of filling. Some people like it just to peek out of the sides. Fill it however you want. Look at that beautiful little macaron. I was really ready to give up on these. Literally, after the 3rd time, I was like, that's it, I'm moving on to the next recipe. But I'm so glad that I was like, nope, this is not going to defeat me, because these turned out really adorable, and I'm just very happy. Alright, so let's give these a taste. the shell of the macaron is like crunchy on the outside but soft on the inside. You get all those subtle little spices. The cream cheese pumpkin filling isn't too sweet, so it counterbalances that super sweet shell. And these are absolutely delicious and delightful. But there they are, pumpkin spice macarons, the recipe that almost defeated me. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe and hit that notification bell because I put out new videos every Thursday. Thank you again, and until next time, happy cooking. Pumpkin spice macarons, take 4. If this doesn't work, I will go curl up and cry in a corner and then just move on to my next recipe.